A scary story for you. The old abandoned mansion on the hill had always been a source of fascination for the townspeople. It had been vacant for as long as anyone could remember, and the locals whispered that it was cursed. Strange noises could be heard coming from the house at night, and the windows were always dark and foreboding. One day, a group of teenagers decided to explore the mansion. They climbed up the hill and approached the front door, which creaked ominously as they pushed it open. The musty smell of decay filled their nostrils as they stepped inside, and they could hear the floorboards creaking beneath their feet. As they made their way through the dark, dusty rooms, they noticed that there were strange symbols etched into the walls and floors. The air grew colder as they descended into the basement, and they could hear the faint sound of chanting coming from below. Suddenly, the floor beneath them gave way, and they fell into a pit filled with bones and decay. They tried to climb out, but the walls were too slippery, and they could feel the cold, clammy hands of the dead pulling them back down. Just when they thought all was lost, they saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was an old woman, her eyes glowing with a strange, otherworldly light. She told them that the mansion was cursed, and that they had to escape before it was too late. They ran as fast as they could, their hearts pounding in their chests, and finally emerged into the sunlight, gasping for air. As they looked back at the old mansion, they could see the woman standing in the doorway, her eyes still glowing with that eerie light. From that day on, the teenagers never spoke of their harrowing experience again, but they knew that they had come face to face with something evil, something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. In the small, isolated village of Blackwood, there was a legend that had been passed down for generations. It was said that deep in the forest, there was a creature that could change its form at will, and it preyed upon anyone who dared to enter its domain. One day, a group of hikers decided to explore the forest, despite the warnings of the villagers. They set out early in the morning, armed with maps and provisions, confident that they could handle whatever challenges lay ahead. As they made their way deeper into the forest, they began to feel a sense of unease. The trees grew closer together, and the light filtering through the canopy became dimmer and dimmer. They could hear strange noises coming from the underbrush, and they could sense that they were being watched. As night fell, they set up camp in a clearing, hoping to get some rest before continuing their journey. But as they settled down for the night, they could feel a cold, malevolent presence surrounding them. They heard rustling in the bushes, and they could see shadowy figures moving just beyond the light of their campfire. Suddenly, one of the hikers let out a blood-curdling scream. They all turned to see a creature emerging from the darkness, its form shifting and changing with every step. Its eyes glowed red in the firelight, and its long, razor-sharp claws gleamed in the night. The hikers tried to run, but the creature was too fast. It pursued them relentlessly, its form twisting and turning as it chased them through the forest. They could feel its hot breath on their necks, and they could hear its ragged breathing just behind them. Finally, after what seemed like hours of running, they stumbled upon an old cabin deep in the forest. They burst inside, panting and gasping for breath, and barricaded the door behind them. But the creature was still out there, waiting for them to come out. They could hear its guttural growls and the scratching of its claws against the wood of the cabin. They knew that they were trapped, with no hope of escape. As the night wore on, their fear grew stronger, and they could feel their sanity slipping away. They huddled together in the dark, praying that the creature would lose interest and leave them alone. But it never did. The creature continued to stalk them, night after night, until they were nothing but a pile of bones in the corner of the cabin. And to this day, the villagers of Blackwood still whisper of the creature that lurks in the forest, waiting for its next victim. Abandoned Asylum. It was a dark and stormy night when Sarah and her friends decided to explore the abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town. They had heard rumors about the place being haunted, but they didn't believe in ghosts and were curious to see what was inside. As they approached the asylum, they could hear the wind howling and the sound of raindrops hitting the roof. The building was old and decrepit, the windows boarded up, and the door rusted shut. Sarah and her friends managed to pry the door open after several attempts and stepped inside. The inside of the asylum was pitch black, and the only light came from their flashlights. The air was damp and musty, and the sound of their footsteps echoed through the halls. They explored the first floor, finding nothing but old hospital equipment, broken furniture, and debris. As they climbed the stairs to the second floor, they heard a strange noise coming from one of the rooms. It sounded like a faint whisper or a soft moan. Sarah's friends were too scared to investigate, but Sarah was determined to find out what was making the noise. She slowly pushed open the door to the room and shone her flashlight inside. The room was empty, except for an old wheelchair sitting in the corner. Suddenly, the wheelchair started moving on its own, rolling towards Sarah with a creaking sound. She screamed and ran out of the room. her friends following close behind. They continued exploring the asylum, encountering more strange noises and unexplainable occurrences. They found a room with a blood-stained operating table, and another with a wall covered in graffiti that read, "Get out." As they were making their way back to the entrance, they heard footsteps coming from behind them. Sarah turned around and saw a figure shrouded in darkness, slowly approaching them. She couldn't make out any features, but she could feel the figure's eyes piercing through her soul. She yelled at her friends to run, and they all sprinted towards the entrance. As they were running, they heard the sound of laughter echoing through the halls, and the feeling of cold breath on the back of their necks. They finally made it back to the entrance and slammed the door shut behind them. They leaned against the door, panting and sweating, relieved to be out of the asylum. As they caught their breath, they heard a voice whispering in their ears, "You'll never escape. You'll be trapped here forever." They quickly ran away from the asylum, never looking back. From that day on, Sarah and her friends never talked about their experience again. But they knew that they had encountered something truly terrifying in that abandoned asylum, something that they would never forget. The doll. A little girl received a doll as a gift, but soon strange things began to happen. The girl would wake up in the middle of the night to find the doll had moved from where she left it. One night, the girl woke up to find the doll sitting on her chest, staring at her with lifeless eyes. The cabin. A group of friends rented a cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway. One night, they heard strange noises outside, but they brushed it off as just the wind. The next morning, they found large, deep footprints in the snow surrounding the cabin. The footprints led to a nearby abandoned house, where they found evidence of someone living there. The road trip. A couple was driving on a deserted highway in the middle of the night when their car broke down. As they waited for a tow truck, they noticed a figure in the distance walking towards them. As the figure got closer, they realized it was a woman covered in blood. She asked for their help, but when they got closer, they saw that her eyes were gouged out. The Ouija board. A group of friends decided to play with a Ouija board. They asked the board if there were any spirits present, and the planchette moved it yes. They asked the spirit's name and it spelled out Killer. Suddenly, the room went dark, and they heard footsteps approaching. The portrait. A family inherited an old portrait from their deceased grandmother. The portrait depicted a woman who looked exactly like the grandmother, but with a sinister smile. One night, the family woke up to find the portrait had moved from where it was hung. As they looked closer, they saw that the woman in the portrait was now frowning. The haunted house. A family moves into a new home, but strange things start happening. Doors slam shut on their own, and they hear whispering voices in the middle of the night. The doppelganger. A person sees someone who looks exactly like them, but they're not sure if it's a reflection or something more sinister. The vengeful ghost. A ghost seeks revenge on the person who wronged them in life, and they won't stop until they get it. The cursed object. A person finds an old artifact with a dark history, and strange things start happening when they bring it home. The urban legend. A person hears a story about a local legend, but they soon realize that the legend might be more than just a story. The smiling man. A man was walking home late at night when he saw another man walking towards him. The man had a strange grin on his face and was dancing in an odd, jerky manner. The man tried to avoid him, but the stranger started following him, still smiling. The man ran away and never saw the stranger again, but the image of the smiling man haunted him for years. The Russian sleep experiment. During World War II, a group of Russian scientists conducted an experiment to test the effects of sleep deprivation. They kept 5 prisoners awake for 15 days by administering a gas that prevented them from sleeping. As the experiment went on, the prisoners